We have a wonderful speaker this morning, and I'd like to introduce him to you. Aaron Baer is the president of Center for Christian Virtue, also known as CCV. CCV seeks the good of their neighbors by advocating for public policy that reflects the truth of the gospel. As president of CCV, Aaron founded the Ohio Christian Education Network, a network of more than 200 evangelical and Catholic schools that advocate to ensure every child can access and afford a high-quality Christian education. Aaron also launched the Christian Business Partnership, the only state-based Christian chamber of commerce, advocating for Christians in the marketplace. I've known Aaron for maybe a couple of years now, and I knew the center was doing great works, and then they hired Peter Range, so I know they're doing even greater works.
That's true.
So I'd like to welcome Aaron Baer.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Well, thank you so much, Perrysburg, for having me this morning. It's a blessing. I love being with early risers. I am an early riser myself. I got to say, getting up at 4 a.m. to drive up to Perrysburg is a little bit earlier than I normally would. I was joking with my friend Jonathan Jakubowski over there. The nice thing is, as you get into middle age, getting ready in the morning gets a little bit easier because you really, just doing your hair really isn't a big thing you have to do. You just kind of give one swipe. And then I watched Kevin Jury get on stage, and I'm like, could I go full that way? But my head's a little not shaped well, so I don't think I can quite go full bald yet. But it is a blessing to be here with you. As Rich mentioned, I run an organization called Center for Christian Virtue. We are Ohio's largest Christian public policy organization. We actually we have with us today Ruth Edmonds, who is with our Church Ambassador Network. We have Monty Lobb, who runs the Christian Business Partnership, our Christian Chamber of Commerce, and then, of course, the one and only Peter Range, which, once more time, give it up to Peter Range. Peter is a real blessing and a gift to the state. And when Peter left Ohio Right to Life, we said we gotta get Peter. There's nobody like Peter, so it's a real gift to have him on the team. The way CCV works, as Rich kind of alluded to, we are a Catholic and evangelical organization. We try to serve Christians all across the state, bringing the voice of Christ to the most important public policy and cultural topics of the day. I myself am a Messianic Jew, so that means I'm a Jewish man that believes in Jesus Christ as Yeshua, as our Savior. So it really works well that I can go into evangelical spaces and Catholic spaces and say, hey, you guys were all grafted into my tree, so you're welcome. But we really are trying to link arms right now on some of the most important topics of the day, things like protecting the sanctity of life. Things like restoring the family, things like protecting religious freedom. But also, and I'm going to move this out of the way, everyone on my team knows I hate podiums. I can't stand still. I'm probably on about 40 ounces of coffee already. So hang with me, guys. We're going to be going all over the place. We really try to bring the body of Christ together to address some of these most important issues. And we're seeing more and more the importance of really having that foundation in the gospel, in truth, as key to the debates of the day. Most of the time when we're getting into conversations at the State House or in politics or in culture, we end up talking about what I would say are the fruits of the various problems we're facing. Hey, we have bad education outcomes, or hey, we have a rising abortion rate, or hey, we have violence in our communities. And this has been something that we have been watching at CCV for some time. And we keep throwing more and more money as a country at these problems, but it doesn't seem like the problem's getting any better, right? And there's a lot of things we could get into there that I'm sure Elon Musk and Doge would like to unpack with you. But we would probably say it's because we're really attacking the wrong problems. And that's why a few months ago, actually about 6 weeks ago, we just published this report. It's called the Hope in a Future Report. And I'm going to unpack this with you here today. of what this report exposes about the reality of family in Ohio and America, and what we need to do about it, and especially as it impacts many of you as business owners. But before I do that, at CCV, probably actually right about now, our team's going to be gathering in our office. We have a team of a little over 30 now. We own a building directly across from the Ohio State House. Actually, was the former Columbus Dispatch building. So if you want good examples of God redeeming all things, he even redeemed a former newspaper building and brought Christians into there. But at 8:15 every morning, the CCV team gathers together and we pray because we believe that our work can only be effective if we are a part of God's redemptive plan, right? If we wouldn't want to be a part of his kingdom coming, not our will being done. And I was so grateful for the prayers we had starting today. I want to actually start us off to frame up this conversation in God's word in one of my favorite stories that I talk about regularly at CCV, which is the book of Nehemiah. And I think the story of Nehemiah has some very good lessons for us today in our country as we look around at the challenges we're facing. So let's put ourselves back in Nehemiah's time, right? The Jewish people have been in exile in Babylon for about 70 years. There was a group that had started going back originally the book of Ezra and Nehemiah were one book. And now we kind of have them as two separate books in our Bible, but they're really one story. The people, a group of exiles actually started going back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, and that's what you read about in the book of Ezra. And then Nehemiah is the story about going back and rebuilding the city of Jerusalem, rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, right? And who was Nehemiah? He was the cupbearer of the king, and he had heard about the struggles of what was happening in Jerusalem, the challenges that God's people were facing there, and his heart was broken. And so he went to King Artaxerxes and said, "Hey, I want to go back. I need to go back and rebuild these walls," which I will just say, Nehemiah wasn't the first, but he was one of the most famous lobbyists out there. So for everyone who has a bad view of lobbyists like myself and Monty, I tell you, even lobbyists can do some good things. So Nehemiah went and lobbied King Artaxerxes and said, "Hey, I need to go back to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem." And King Artaxerxes didn't just say, "Yep, that's fine." He said, "I will not just send you back, I'm going to send you back with resources. I'm going to send you back with a guarantee of safe passage and support you in this endeavor." So Nehemiah goes back, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time. You guys know the story. He gets there, and at first, even the people in Jerusalem are saying, "This can't be done." They kind of mock him for it. He starts making progress. They start getting on board. The surrounding nations, they start seeing what he's doing, and they get upset, and they start threatening Nehemiah, and they start threatening Jerusalem with attack. Nehemiah, you get that awesome scene of Nehemiah rebuilding the walls with a hammer in one hand and a sword in another hand, and really ultimately triumphing and rebuilding the walls, right? Then Nehemiah, because he is still the cupbearer to the king, he still has an important role with King Artaxerxes. He goes back to King Artaxerxes, and I always say, most of the time when we talk about the book of Nehemiah, we kind of end the story there, right? And that's really Nehemiah's 13 chapters. That's Nehemiah 1 to 12. And it kind of could end very cleanly right there. If this was a Hollywood script, it would end right then and there as a great triumph of like, look, he did it. He overcame the haters and the attackers and all this kind of stuff. And he rebuilt the walls, and that's phenomenal. But it doesn't end there. There is this 13th chapter, which is really hard and really confusing and super anticlimactic. Because Nehemiah, after being back with King Artaxerxes for some time, he comes back into Jerusalem, and what does he see? He sees all of God's people doing all of the same things that got them exiled in the first place. Right? They're not honoring the Sabbath. They're not following God's ways. They are intermarrying again outside of God's people and following these pagan gods. as my daughters always say, lowercase g gods. You actually get this scene of Nehemiah in just absolute frustration. He's pulling people's hair out and he's kicking people, and the last words of Nehemiah end with him saying, "God, help me because I tried," right? And again, this is not the way a Hollywood script would go, unless this was, like a Star Wars type movie, which was multiple episodes, because ultimately it leads to the true Redeemer who is going to bring salvation in Jesus. But in just this book of Nehemiah, we see really what ends in kind of a failure in all of this journey that we go through. And so why was it that in many ways Nehemiah was a success? He was faithful to the call God had him, but why didn't he get the ultimate result he was looking for? Well, I would argue it was because the people that Nehemiah were working with were trying to address the fruit of the problem and not the root. And I think in America today, that's what we're doing. We are trying to address the fruit of the problems we face and not the root, right? The fruit of the problem of Nehemiah's time was, hey, our city is massively exposed. We could be attacked. We don't have safety and security. We need to rebuild these walls, right? But the root of the problem was, hey, people of God, where are you finding your security in? Don't get me wrong, rebuilding walls is a good thing to have, especially in those times. You needed to protect your people. It was a godly endeavor to protect their people. But the question was, where were they putting their hope and what were the things they were trying to fix? And I will tell you today, in America, when we're looking at the problems that we're trying to fix, you can see we're going after the fruit too much, right? We are seeing, basically in our context, whenever any problem comes around, whether it's a mental health crisis, whether it's poverty, whether it's education outcomes, whether it's violence, our answer, especially in America, tends to be, let's throw more money at it. And sometimes it is a financial problem. But I think what we're going to see today, what I want to walk through with you today, is the root of this problem, I would say, is really twofold. It is the decline of marriage, and what I'd say the decline of marriage and collapse of family, and it is a denial of who God is. I really want to focus in here with you, though, on the decline of marriage and the collapse of family. Because in our country today, we have tended to segregate out. There's your fiscal issues, right? And there's your social issues, right? And, good business folks like yourself, you should just be focused on tax rates and tariffs and, give it 5 minutes and the tariffs will change. Don't you worry. You should only be focused on those economic things, and all of these social issues over here, things like marriage, things like abortion, things like religious freedom, those are all sort of nice side pet projects for guys like me and Peter to get all worked up on. But really, the serious folks are over here looking at the financial issues and what's going on in the markets today. And what this new report we just put out exposes is really these things, what I think a lot of Christians understand, these things are so deeply connected. And if we really want to be dealing with some of these important economic issues, we have to get this foundation, these social issues foundations right. So I'm going to just walk through a few slides with you here. I'm typically not a big charts and graphs guy. I'm a good story kind of guy. But there's a few numbers I'm going to walk through with you here, and my good new friend Sarah in the back is going to help me walk through these slides. And for our folks on radio, I'll explain what we're showing to our friends in the room here with us. And let me just say, too, if you were doubting at all that the Holy Spirit is with us here today, literally we were trying to get the slides to work, and Sarah said a quick prayer, and all of a sudden they worked just like that. So the Holy Spirit is indeed with us in this room. But I want to just first off talk through some numbers on what is the actual state of Ohio's unions. And what this data comes from is, as I mentioned in our Hope in a Future report, we commissioned a researcher out of the University of Virginia. His name is Professor Brad Wilcox. Professor Wilcox is maybe the foremost researcher, sociology researcher in the country on marriage and family. He is someone that everyone from J.D. Vance to Bernie Marino look to help understand what's actually happening with families in America. About a year ago, he published a book called Get Married. I first heard Dr. Wilcox speak about 15 years ago and have been one of his biggest fans ever since. And we wanted to, at CZV, say, hey, what's actually specifically going on in Ohio with marriage and family, and how is that fueling the challenges that we see in our state today? And so I want to just start with sort of the state of our unions in Ohio. Let's go to the next slide here. So first and foremost, we have a marriage rate that is collapsing, that is dramatically decreasing. Fewer and fewer young folks are deciding to get married, and they're actually delaying marriage than ever before. I'm just going to cut to some of the chases here with you on some of these things. For the business owners in the room, this is particularly bad news because statistically speaking, the hardest workers and the best earners are married men, right? So the longer that married men, we see this through Dr. Wilcox's research, married men, I can attest to this, and my wife certainly can attest to this after being married 15 years. We get, I think the best word for it is civilized much more once you get married. I think most folks would recognize that. But also married men are driven to earn more, driven to work harder, more likely to show up on time, more likely to try to do everything they can to avoid getting laid off because they know they have to provide for their family. I think the one little bit of good news on the state of marriage in Ohio today is we do see the divorce rate declining, right? I will say most of the stats you hear about divorce, especially, I can't help but say this, especially with a group like this, you will hear, the old trope of, the divorce rate is same inside the church as it is outside the church. That's just not true. It was never true. It's especially not true today. But we are seeing culture-wide divorce decrease. Why is that? It's kind of makes sense as you see marriage rates decrease, you'd see divorce decrease because people are being more selective, which overall we think is a pretty good thing. But overall, we'd much more prefer seeing a higher marriage rate. Let's go to the next slide here. This one is perhaps the most alarming, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later in regards to the abortion issue. But we have a collapsing fertility rate in America. We're simply not replacing ourselves. So basically, what you need to see in a country for the society to perpetuate itself is you need to see 2.1 live births for every childbearing age woman. Right now, what's a 2.1 birth? It's an average number. We are at 1.7 right now. Right, so we're not actually replacing our population. And it's the reason why you see some of these things like Social Security and other big programs having some big fiscal cliffs coming up because we don't actually have the people coming up and working in the workforce. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is probably the number that jarred me the most that came out of our report, is that 53% of Ohio's kids today are raised in non-intact homes. So that means they don't have a married dad at home with them. This is a demographic nightmare long term. And the reality with this number is it's only getting worse. So more and more kids, what one author called a few years ago, the two-parent privilege, what more and more kids are not getting the blessing of knowing is having a married mom and dad at home. Now could be from one of two things, could be from divorce, but it's primarily from it's about 46% of kids are born into non-intact homes today without a married dad there. Now, what does that actually mean? Let's pop over to the next slide here, because this is the real life impact that these numbers have on you, on your community, and on our state. Let's go to the next slide. So first and foremost, one of the things that really jumped out to me in Brad's research is there is a direct line of correlation between kids raised in a home without a married dad and child poverty. Right? I know we have our good friends here from Catholic Charities. They're sort of living the real life fallout of kids not having a married mom and dad at home. You'll see, I'm actually originally from Warren, Ohio, in the Steel Valley, over in Mahoning Valley, Warren, Youngstown area. Warren, Youngstown is the hardest hit by this reality. It's really the place where you see these numbers most. In Youngstown, 68% of kids are born into a household without a married dad there. 68%. I mean, you are the minority if you have a married mom and dad at home in Youngstown. In Warren, my hometown, it's 66%. And if you look at what this chart shows, is that 50% of kids in Youngstown are in poverty. And what this chart, you'll see charts all the way down, is the more the number increases of kids that have a married mom and dad at home, the more the number decreases of child poverty. It's a direct correlation between marriage and child poverty. So I gotta say, as we are thinking about poverty today, how much time do we spend thinking about marriage? How much time do we spend thinking about what's the family structure like that these kids are coming from? Right? And actually what Brad's book, Get Married, documents is that he argues that marriage is becoming an elite institution. Right? It's really the college educated that are basically the only ones really consistently getting married. And this has some public policy implications that I'll get into a little bit, but this is really at the core of what we see the impact of marriage and family collapse. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about student outcomes and education success. I'm just going to point to one thing here in particular. The chart on the left, the bar graph on the left, shows the percentage of kids, and this is all data from Ohio, that get contacted by the school, the parents that get contacted by the school because of behavioral issues. And what you'll see, it's 17% of kids that had a married mom and dad at home get contacted by school for behavioral issues. It's 29% of kids from single parent homes. Again, the child is much more likely to get into behavioral problems when there's not a married mom and dad at home. I will readily attest to being the case subject of this, right? My parents divorced when I was 13, and by the time I was going into high school, and I will tell you, my parents heard a lot more from the school after the divorce. And those are stories for another time, but it is a very practical reality. I point to this all the time because, as was mentioned earlier, we do a lot of work in education. And what you hear consistently is, we underfund education. We underfund education. Well, I'll tell you, Burroughs Elementary School in the city of Columbus, they get $24,646 per kid for every kid in that school. They have a third grade reading proficiency test. We have a requirement in the state. They had a 6% passage rate on that. The taxpayers spend more to send those kids to Burroughs Elementary School in downtown Columbus than we do if they were to send them to Ohio State. But this is the reality of what's happening. And why is that? Is that you talk to those teachers, they will tell you consistently, these kids don't have a supportive household for them to be coming home to. Now, don't ask me why. These same people that are seeing, hey, these kids are struggling because they don't have a mom and dad at home. Don't ask me why they end up bringing Planned Parenthood in to teach their sex ed and teach these kids the very worldview that has destroyed their future. But that's the reality of where we are today. And it's why we keep throwing more money at public education and our results are getting worse. It's because these numbers are going up of kids not having a mom and dad at home. Let's go to the next slide. This is one that really hits home for me. This is the depression one, right? I think for a lot of us, we look around and we see anybody who knows a young person can see, hey, mental health and depression are on the rise right now with the next generation. Well, I'm sorry. This is domestic violence. Will you go to the next slide for me? And I'm going to come back to this one. Mental health and depression are on the rise right now. And what we see is there is a direct correlation between kids with depression, kids dealing with mental health issues, and kids and what their home life looks like. So if you're in an intact home, about 6% of those kids are dealing with depression and mental illness right now. It's more than double that if you're from a non-intact home, right? These are, and I will tell you, big picture, what we're seeing more and more on the Medicaid front is dealing with mental health is one of the major drivers of the growth of Medicaid expenses. Let's go back to the other side if you can, Sarah. This is the last one here for you. I'll just show. This documents kids who experience domestic violence or neighborhood violence. Again, you see the trend across here, guys. If you're in an intact home, it's almost impossible that you're going to end up dealing with some type of violence in your community, right? And if you're in a non-intact home, the numbers are through the roof. Now, I have to just stop and give a caveat here, especially as somebody who, for my sort of late teenage years, was in a single-parent home. This is not a time to be beating up on single parents. That's not what we're doing here, right? Single moms, single dads are doing the best they can, right? But if you go to any pregnancy center here, right, around town that are dealing with these single moms and are trying to help them, they will tell you one thing they really desperately wish is that they had a man at home to help them, right? That we're just talking about the fundamental practical realities of what we're dealing with here today. And these stats, right, are so stark, right? I will tell you, just working in public policy, working down at the State House, you'll see lawmakers react to way less sort of stark numbers than these. And this is sort of the problem, though, is that nobody actually wants to look at these numbers and address them. Will you go skip ahead 2 slides for me now, Sarah? So, you know, like I mentioned, I work at the Ohio State House. I love this picture because you can kind of see we actually own 2 buildings. So you see those 3 buildings right there? We own the 2 on the left, right across from the State House. The middle one is the one that we're occupying. That's actually an old picture. It says the Columbus Dispatch. Now it says Center for Christian Virtue on it. But we work at the Ohio State House day in and day out. We've got a team of about 6 to 7 lobbyists. And I just want to talk with you real briefly. What does all of this family and marriage breakdown actually mean for the growth of government, right? So I'll put this in some real numbers for you. So right now, the state's working on the budget, right? We do this every 2 years. Actually, literally just yesterday, the House passed our state budget. It's a $61 billion budget that we pass. And a few weeks ago, Brad and I, Dr. Wilcox and I, had an op-ed in Fox News that broke this down and says, if you look at the state budget and you think about those numbers I just walked through with you, we spend about 88% of our state budget, of that $61 billion, in one of 3 buckets, right? We educate, we medicate, and we incarcerate, right? So 88% of the $61 billion we spend is going to go into one of these 3 budget buckets: educate, medicate, incarcerate. Educate, think K-12 education, think higher education. Medicate, think health and human services, think Medicaid, Medicare. And incarcerate, think law and order, think courts, think police officers, all of that. Now, sit with me for a second and think back to those numbers I just walked through about violence in our communities, about child poverty, about education outcomes, right? About mental health. All 3 of those areas, educate, medicate, incarcerate, all 3 of those areas get infinitely more expensive when you raise kids in non-intact homes. It's undeniable, right? And this was actually the editorial that Brad and I wrote, was saying, hey, listen, we love what Elon Musk is doing with Doge, right? There's a lot of government waste, a lot of government fraud. But after a certain point, there's only going to be so many transgender operas in Colombia that we can defund, right? There's not infinite supply of those things, right? We're cutting off that funding now. The question is, we're still going to have a bloated federal deficit, a bloated federal government and state government. And that will not change until we actually start dealing with the family, until we actually start diving in on those real issues. Now, I'm going to come back to this about what does that actually look like. I'm going to take a quick detour because this family study also has some very real implications for another issue that we are very passionate about at CCV, which is protecting the life of unborn children. Sarah, we jump to the next slide. So, I know many in this room were very much involved in fighting the abortion amendment in 2023. Literally nobody in the state worked harder or put more miles on their car than Peter Range fighting this thing. I mean, literally, there's a joke of if there's 2 or 3 people in the room, then the Lord is there. If there were 2 or 3 people in the room, Peter was there talking to them about this abortion amendment. Literally, I called him one night and I'm like, hey, what are you up to? And he was driving across I-80 to Youngstown to meet with 12 ladies in the basement of a parish about what they can do to fight this thing. And Peter and I actually served on the board of the campaign to fight the abortion amendment together. And we were truly devastated at the passage of that abortion amendment. After the passage of the abortion amendment, we commissioned an exit poll because we want to get back to the ballot one day to repeal this thing. We wanted to figure out, okay, so what actually happened? Why did this pass? At the end of the day, we got outspent. They had $60 million. We had 20, and they actually sat on cash. Right? They could have spent even more. So there was a lot of things that were stacked against us. But we really wanted to understand why did the state embrace this radical abortion amendment? There's a lot of things that I could get into there, but I'm not going to right now. A few things jumped out. You can go to the next slide. First and foremost, 1 out of 3 weekly attending churchgoers voted yes on the abortion amendment. And that cuts across Catholics and conservative evangelical denominations. It just was a sort of a crushing number. But we also wanted to look at, what were some of the key drivers. When you're doing an exit poll like this, you want to really understand what is it that motivated people to vote a certain way. Because the reality is right now, we have a real crisis on our hands with abortion. And will you hop to the next slide for me, Sarah? So let me just put things in real life numbers for you on what the abortion crisis is doing to our state. So this is 2023 data. We'll have 2024 data here soon. And this is all rough estimates here, or rough round numbers here. From the Ohio Department of Health, there were 131,000 deaths in Ohio in 2023. There was 127,000 live births. So this gets to my fertility rate earlier, right? We are not having enough babies to replace our population. There was also in 2023, now again, this was before the abortion amendment went into effect, right? So we're expecting this number to go through the roof. There was 22,000 kids who lost their lives at the hands of the abortionist in 2023. I want to put that in context for you. Sarah, next slide, please. That means 1 in 7 children conceived in Ohio lost their lives at the hands of the abortionist. 1 in 7. Right? That's an Isaiah 10, woe to you who allows unrighteousness to reign in your time. That is a judgment on our state and our country, that we allow 1 in 7 of our most innocent to die in abortion clinics. Now, so as we're thinking about how do we save these kids, we want to be really honest with ourselves about what is actually happening. Why did so many people in Ohio embrace this abortion amendment? And one of the things that really jumped out to us that ultimately led us to put this report together was we looked at what are the different populations and how they voted. And the most surprising thing to me was that a better indicator for voting no on abortion up to birth was being married compared to having kids. Think about that with me, right? You're more likely to vote no if you were married as opposed to if you had kids. That kind of is jarring for the pro-life movement, who we've based a lot of our efforts around the premise of, if I can convince you that an unborn life is a baby, then you will say we shouldn't have abortion, right? And who else would be more convinced that an unborn life is a baby than a parent who has seen an ultrasound, for goodness sake, and can see, hey, look, this ultrasound turned into this kid, right? But actually, those folks were still more likely to vote yes on the abortion amendment than people who were just married. Now, again, some people fall into both categories. But why is that, right? Well, I think, one, we see that a lot of Ohio today has what I call the Bill Maher position. Any of you guys ever watched Bill Maher? Hopefully not, because you're good Christians. But if you've ever seen his clips online, he had this whole rant about how, yep, I know it's a baby, but yep, I'm okay killing it, right? It's a really callous position. But really what I think that the exit poll shows us is that the ability to choose life has as much to do with having a biblical sexual ethic as it does with understanding the reality of the humanity of an unborn child, right? So if we actually want to save babies long term in Ohio, we need to save marriage, right? Marriage is the thing that gives young people and everybody the courage and the understanding of what sex is for. I will just argue, and this is for another conversation, but abortion and contraception has done more to break our understanding of the humanity of the unborn child than anything else, right? Because what it did is it separated the sex act from the consequences of that sex act. And until we deal with marriage and that sort of the fallout of the sexual revolution, we're not going to be able to fully save lives. So that was frankly one of the other reasons why we did this report, was we said, okay, so if we actually want to get back to the ballot to save lives, we have to deal with the marriage rate in Ohio. With a declining marriage rate, we're not going to be able to convince enough people to roll back this deadly abortion amendment. So I want to close out here because I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, or you guys can just run me off. Let's go to the next slide here for us on just one more slide over on where do we actually go from here? What is the actual solution? Because I've painted a pretty bleak picture. Well, here's the bad news. There's not a quick fix to this, right? We're dealing with cultural problems. The numbers that I kind of walked you through, a lot of the policymakers, especially the ones that are really tuned in, these were revealing to them, but maybe not shocking. And I think for a lot of us experientially, especially if you're working in low-income communities, you see the fallout of this, right? But the truth is, most of the time we don't talk about this because there's not an easy answer, right? The past 6 years of CCV's work, right? CCV has been around since 1983. I started running the organization in 2016. The past 6 years of CCV's work, starting in 2018, were really focused on the transgender issue, right? Especially what was going on with transgender surgeries on kids. In fighting that problem, as we sort of diagnosed that problem compared to this, the benefit, I don't even want to say benefit, but the less challenging part of that problem was that it was a really straightforward thing we needed to do. We saw there were 6 gender clinics in the state putting kids on cross-sex hormones, doing gender surgeries on kids, all of this kind of stuff. We just need to pass a law to ban it, and it's done, right? And that's what we did. Right? It took 6 years to get there, but it was a really straightforward path. We just got to ban this. We'll save kids from this stuff. Dealing with marriage and family is not that straightforward, right? Go to the next slide for me real quick. This really paints the picture of what it's actually going to take to save marriage and family. So within this study is all focused on, the Hope in a Future report is all focused on Ohio, but there's one part that is nationally focused, and it's what we call the Family Structure Index. So the Family Structure Index takes all 50 states and ranks them according to the health of their family culture, using demographic data, looking at marriage rates, looking at fertility rates, and things like that. And Brad and his team put together a formula to rank the states. Go to the next slide for me, Sarah. And what we found is Ohio is ranked 29th. We have the 29th worst family structure, family culture in the country. You guys can see, who sees what the number 1 state up there is? Utah. Utah's number one by a wide margin. If you look in the report, you'll see Utah, their family structure index score is really far ahead. Now, what's funny about Utah is Utah is also the number one ranked state in a group called the American Legislative Exchange Council's Rich State, Poor State report. And the Rich State, Poor State report ranks the states on the states with the lowest taxes and the lowest regulations, right? And why does, my friends at ALEC always like to talk about, hey, look how great Utah's state government's doing. They're really shrinking government, cutting taxes, making it easy for businesses. Well, yeah, guys, it's really easy for Utah to have small government when only 20% of their kids are born into out-of-wedlock households, right? 43% of Ohio's kids are born into out-of-wedlock households. And yeah, our government has to grow quite a bit. Now, the interesting thing here is, why is it that Utah has such great family culture, family structure? And it's honestly because of the Mormon Church. And hear me out here, brothers and sisters. I've worked with Mormons throughout my career. I would not say Mormons are Christians. And I think it is a judgment on Christians today that Mormons do a better job celebrating and honoring and valuing an institution that God created than God's own people do. And this really paints the picture, paints the challenges of what actually we need to do to restore a marriage and family and ultimately save lives from the abortion industry. There are some things in public policy that we can do. There are some bills we can pass. Actually, right now in the state budget, we included a requirement that public schools teach the success sequence, right? That is a very sort of nonpartisan, factual, data-driven approach that says, that teaches kids, if you graduate high school, get a job, and get married before having kids, there's only a 3% chance you're going to end up in poverty, right? That message is not being taught in schools right now, and we're going to require it. And there's things like that we can do. There's things we can do to alleviate marriage penalties in welfare programs, right? So you guys have seen this before. Single person gets this amount of money for maybe food stamps, SNAP, or they get this much of a housing subsidy. But if they get married, their subsidy drops off a cliff. And so you have all these incentives for low-income folks to not get married, right? But I got to say, these are problems. These are things we need to fix. This is not why we see these collapsing marriage and family rates. The reality is, it starts in the church. It starts with, how much do we value marriage and family? And when I say the church, I don't just mean these buildings. I'm even talking about your businesses, right? Brad has all of this data out there that shows the best workers are married workers. And I know folks like Pat and Patty have done a lot to talk about marriage in their business. I know Al Caperna has done the same with CMC Group. But really the message that CCV, that Peter and I and Monty at the Christian Business Partnership and Ruth and the Church Ambassador Network, as we're going about working with churches, we're saying, hey, what are you say you want to care for the orphan, the widow, the stranger in your community. You want to see your business thrive. You want to see your community thrive. How much are you doing today to celebrate and encourage marriage and family? We're doing quite a bit with CCV to come. I keep saying this is the next 10 years of CCV's work. We actually just signed a contract with an organization called Communio that we're going to go church by church, parish by parish, with the blessings of the different dioceses and denominations we're going to be working with, to build out marriage and family programming. Because if we're actually going to change the direction of our state, we have to deal with these numbers. You guys will see on your tables a promotion about our upcoming galas that we have at CCV. On May 9th, we have Sage Steele down in Cincinnati, and on May 10th, we have Bernie Marino and John Husted in Columbus. And we'd love to have you. We hope you get a table. I'm going to say this at our galas. CCV is a 501c3 nonprofit. When we fundraise, I could not get in front of our financial supporters and fundraise to fight abortion or fundraise to fix education. I couldn't get up and fundraise anymore if we weren't talking about marriage and family. Because if we don't fix this, everything else we're talking about is just dealing with the fruit. And it's time we get real serious about the problems we face. So thank you so much for having me, guys.